Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the Seahawks Collective podcast in association with Hog Media. And I'm Brian M. Hauser, your host for this first episode. That will change, as a matter of fact. We have a fourth person we'll be adding into the mix in a couple of weeks. You may know her father. You're soon going to really know her. Her name's Annabelle Hasselback. She's fantastic. She was an intern for the Seahawks last year. Mike and I got a chance to meet her. She's great. She's got some summer plans that she's going to complete before she joins the show, and then she'll take over the hosting duties. As I said, I'm Brian Emmer. You probably know me from Hawk Blogger and the daily pods I do over there. But let's bring in the other fellas part of this show. This is going to be a great collection of voices from different places in one place to talk about the Seahawks each and every week, 5 p.m. Pacific time. You will find us here on the Seahawks Collective YouTube channel. Let's start with our guy that's up in the middle of the night, as he often is, across the pond, Rob Staten of the Seahawks Draft Blog. Welcome, and how are you doing, Rob?
I'm great, Brian. Really pleased to be part of this. And if people wonder, have not seen Seahawks Draft Blog or have seen the channels or the shows we've done, maybe wondering why is somebody from England up at 1 o'clock in the morning talking about the Seahawks. But yeah, I've done the Seahawks Draft Blog since 2008, and I've followed the Seahawks since 2006. I'm a senior journalist for the BBC and do some of the national radio stuff for the NFL as well. But nothing excites me more than opportunity to talk about the Seahawks. So having this chance to come with you guys every week at 1 o'clock in the morning and talk about it, even though I should be in bed, I'm very much looking forward to doing this and getting into some good topics today and for the rest of the season.
We got to get you on the field at some point, Rob. How are you juggling a soccer ball on one foot while throwing a football with your hand? That's the picture I've got of you constantly going back between every shaped ball you can find. So if people have not followed him for the football stuff, for the soccer stuff, whichever side you are, he's a great follow for that as well. That brings us to Michael Sean Dugar, the award-winning. Yes, he was named by the National Sports Media Association the best young reporter in 2021. Mike, are you still young at this point a few years later?
My back and my shoulder would say no. I am not. I can't even sleep on my left side these days. So something's wrong with my shoulder, but happy to be here. One half of the Seahawks Man to Man podcast as well. Shout out to my co-host Chris Kidd, author, coming soon here. Yeah, just wrote a book, The Franchise, Seattle Seahawks, A Curated History of the Legion of Boom. Drops August 12th, everywhere books are sold. Shameless plug, got to throw that in there. I'm pretty sure if you follow the Seahawks, you know one of the three of us. So yeah, man, let's just get to it.
Yeah, so Mike covers Seahawks for The Athletic. Great stuff there, always thought-provoking. And the book's coming out here real soon, so make sure you check that out. From what I've heard secondhand and a little bit from you firsthand, Mike, there's a lot of great research that went into that, a lot of interviews you've done with people that were part of that era of football. And it's honestly it's the peak of Seahawks franchise history. Until something comes along that beats it, that is the best part that has ever existed for the Seahawks franchise. So I'm certainly eager to see it. And congrats, man. That is an amazing accomplishment to have that book published.
Oh, man. Thank you. I appreciate it, man. Yeah, everybody go check that out. Pre-order available now wherever you pre-order books. Available overseas, too. I made sure that when I negotiated with the publisher, I said, people over there in London and Germany, I know firsthand, they care. I've been there. They cared. So, yeah, available everywhere.
They do. And I'm offering this on behalf of Mike. He's going to pay the tariffs for you to if you want to cross the pond. So, no, I'm just kidding. With introductions aside, let's have a little fun to start with. We'll play a little game here with you two, and I'm mostly going to leave this to you. I might chime in here and there, but a few things popped up today that caught my attention, and my question for the two of you is news or no news? And we're going to go through each of these few topics, and you guys tell me whether you think it's news or no news and why. Mike, I'm going to start with you. Jamal Adams, the former Jet, the former Seahawks, the former Titan, the former Lion, signs with Pete Carroll's Raiders. Is that news or no news?
I'm only going to call it news in Seattle just because the Seahawks play the Raiders. here in Seattle. That makes it newsy. As you just mentioned, Jamal's played for a bunch of teams in the last few years. Cup of coffee here, Detroit, Tennessee. So he's officially a journeyman now, and journeyman signing places typically is not news. But I say in Seattle, that is news because we get another Jamal Adams game in Seattle, and which that'll be good entertainment. And otherwise, like I think preseason games are pretty boring. But you bring Pete here, you bring Gino, you bring Jamal. That's worth me staying up late for.
Rob, news or no news? Jamal Adams signs with the Raiders.
I think it's news, but only really news to like Mike said, to those in Seattle. And for me personally, I think it's news because it just reinforces. I'm pleased that the Seahawks moved on from Pete Carroll. With the greatest respect to Pete, who did an amazing job in Seattle. This sort of retreading back. I mean, he signed Philip Dorsett as well today. This constantly going back to his players, guys that he's familiar with. Jamal Adams is done. Like, he's not somebody who is going to have an impact in the NFL. Maybe it's a nice story for him to be able to come back. For me, it's just a reminder of all the nonsense that happened towards the end of his time in Seattle. I don't like Jamal Adams. I'm glad he's not in Seattle. And if Pete Carroll not being in the head coach means that he's not in Seattle, then I think this is all the better that they moved on last year and brought Mike MacDonald in to replace Pete Carroll.
Rob bringing the fire right out the gates. I got to come back to you, Mike. Before I'm breaking my own rules here. So I'm curious, when Rob says that this is an example of what Pete did that maybe was part of what held him back in his last few years, maybe overly loyal to players that maybe had passed their prime. Do you agree with that, or do you see it differently?
I think that is what happened. Overly is kind of subjective, but you think about it, a lot of us, if your back's against the ropes, you're going to go with what you know. You're going to hire people around you. If you're in a contract year and you're in a tech job and you got to fix an app by the end of the fiscal year, and a guy that you worked with at Stanford, you're probably going to bring him in to help you with the app, because you guys did something in college together or at a previous employer. And I think that's just human nature. You're thinking about it. Now, it can still be to your detriment. You guys could break the app and get fired, but the idea of like, hey, I know him, so I'll work with him again. If it went well, obviously, I don't think Russ and Pete would work together again. And I think, but that part, I don't really fault a lot of coaches for, it can work really well. I think a good example of working well is Dan Quinn in Washington. When he left the Cowboys, he went through his phone and said, who do I know? I'm calling you. I'm calling you. I'm calling Bobby. I'm calling Ken. Calling this guy I worked with here. And it worked out, right? And they went to the NFC title game. So I don't think inherently just calling people even if they are older or whatever, whether it's an older coach or older player, I think it can be valuable. It's just a matter of who you're calling. And in this case, I can agree with Rob and probably everyone in Seattle that's Jamal's probably not going to have a huge impact with the Raiders, just like he didn't have an impact in Tennessee, didn't have an impact in Detroit. It's just not an impact player anymore. And I think the other take I have on this topic is more broadly is that we got to have, you guys notice when the insiders tweet like, this team has signed such and such, and it's an accolade attached to the person's name that was like 2 or 3 contracts ago. I think the rule should be you can't put Pro Bowl or All Pro or whatever it is on that person's name unless they happen on the contract they're currently on. I think that would be my rule. Like, I don't want to hear, like, I think Rappaport's tweet or somebody who had it today was like 3-time Pro Bowler Jamal Adams. Like, come on. I think he last made the Pro Bowl in 2020. Like, that's not, or however many times he's made it. Like, that's not, you don't do that, like whoever signed Von Miller the other day, right? It happened. Yeah, former first round pick. Yeah. And it's somebody who was drafted in 2014. It's like, well, come on, that doesn't, let's stop doing that. That's my first take of the show. Let's stop. I like it. If you're on a current contract, your accolades are irrelevant.
All right. The only thing I'll add to this is I do think for Pete Carroll, culture setting is a key, and he will bring in guys that he feels like are going to help him erect the culture he wants as soon as possible. And he's willing to take lesser players to make sure, to Mike's point, that they're players who are going to bring the culture he wants. We'll see if that works. All right. We're going to be quicker with the rest of these news or no news. Rob, we'll start with you on this one. Matt Stafford has back soreness and will start camp on the sidelines working with trainers. News or no news?
Yeah, I think it is news because Matt Stafford didn't have a very good season last year. And I think that was clouded a little bit with what happened in the playoffs when the Rams got hot and almost beat the Eagles and played very well in the playoffs. But during the season, he wasn't very good. They've got issues at left tackle. Matt Stafford is now hurt already. He's getting older. He has been an Iron Man in his career. He's played through an awful lot of injuries and done well through that. But this just can't go on forever. And if they can't protect him and he's already got a bad back, then I think this could spell danger for the Rams and good news for everybody else in the NFC West. I think the Seahawks are going to win the NFC West. I think the Rams are getting too much love based on what happened in the playoffs last year. I don't think this is good news at all for the Rams.
Mike, news or no news?
I think it's news because, one, it's very relatable. It sounds like Matt Stafford woke up with a bad back and he's 37. I just turned 33 on Thursday and I woke up with my shoulder hurting, like I told you. So thank you. So the idea that you just kind of woke up and something hurts and you can't go today, very relatable content from Matthew Stafford there. I also think it's news because backs and necks and, to a lesser extent, knees are things that kind of just don't really get better when you play football and as you get older in your mid to late 30s. Like you start waking up with a bad back or a sore neck or he's got something in his knee, that's type of stuff. When you start waking up with that, or you have that because you just worked out in shorts, that's type of stuff that is cause for concern because by December and January, which is where teams like that want to be, boy, it'll be your back, it'll be your neck, it'll be your toe, it'll be your hip, it'll be your elbow, so I think that's news for sure.
All right, we got three more, and then we're going to get into some Seahawks stuff. It is the Seahawks Collective here, the first show. So we will talk Seahawks, but this is all NFC West related. Next one, come to you, Mike, first. Alaric Jackson, the left tackle for the Rams, had blood clots or has blood clots, but he will start camp not on the PUP list or the NFI non-football injury list. News or no news?
I'd say news as well. I think in the larger context of the NFC West, health has determined the winner of the division quite a bit, really. For instance, like when the Niners are healthy, they just tend to go win it, and if Stafford's hurt, the Rams don't have a shot. The Seahawks probably could have won the year that Russ broke his finger. You never know. Like there's just like injuries play a role too. So whether you're talking about linemen, quarterbacks, just those premier position guys, I think, when they're having any type of issue, even if it's not something that lands them on a list of some sort, I think there's too many lists too. My other hot take. I think that's news.
All right, Rob, I'm going to skip you on that one and go to the next one. Brandon Ayuk, the wide receiver who had an ACL and MCL injury, quote, according to John Lynch, quote, not anywhere close to having a concrete timeline to return. News or no news?
I don't think it's news because his injury when he suffered it looked incredibly bad and that it could seriously impact his 2025 season as well. The 49ers seem to be trying out anybody who has ever played wide receiver who is still available in the NFL right now, and they are scrambling around. This is typically when the Niners go out and make a trade anyway and try and bring somebody in. That won't be a surprise. I think it's hilarious that Juwan Jennings is also trying to wrangle a contract situation at the minute too. So they look like they're in a bit of a messy situation with that. But I think with Ayuk, I didn't really expect that he was going to be back or anywhere near his best this season. So I'm not sure this is a big surprise.
All right, and we're going to round this out with you, Mike. Last one, news or no news, the 49ers sign wide receiver Equanimeous St. Brown. News or no news?
That's no news. We're talking about non-impact guys earlier. That is what, with all due respect, that's what that comes down to. That is not news.
Yeah, man, it is a sad state, a scary state if you're a 49ers fan, which almost nobody watching this show probably is. That wide receiver room's in trouble. All right, so that is news or no news. That was fun. We've got all warmed up here. Let's get into Seahawks topics. And the first thing we want to talk about here is pressure. And I'm not talking about quarterback pressure. I'm not talking about sacks. I'm talking about pressure job related. And the question at hand is who has the most pressure when camp opens tomorrow for the Seahawks? Now, this can be a player. This can be a coach. This can be a front office member. Wherever you want to go, it just has to be someone related to the Seahawks. I will not accept Steve Rabel as an answer. That's too far afield. But who comes to mind? Rob, I'm going to start with you on this one. Who has the most pressure and the most to prove when camp opens tomorrow?
I think the obvious answer is Sam Darnold, isn't it? The last thing that he needs is to have a bad start to training camp, and the storyline being Sam Darnold doesn't look very good. So he doesn't have to necessarily come out there and throw the ball around and have all of the media raving about him and have all of the talk shows and the radio saying how amazing Sam Darnold looks. They found the guy. What they can't afford are more headlines from what people were saying during OTAs and mini camps and stuff like that, like comparing him to Sam Howell and stuff. That's really not what you need. Because I get the sense that Sam Darnold's he's quite a confidence-related player. And I think if he feels good and if he's going into that season feeling like he's had a good training camp, then that will help. I think if he, off the back of the way that last season ended, if he has a bad training camp and then things start badly against the Niners in week one, it could be a bit of an issue. So I do think there's a lot of pressure on him. There's always the most pressure and the biggest spotlight on the quarterback anyway. When you've just signed a new contract, you're just going to a new team, you have to start well. So apologies that I picked the really obvious answer there, but I think it is Sam Darnold who's under the most pressure.
Mike, I'm going to take Sam Darnold off the board, and you can admit that would have been your answer, but give me who you would say who's not named Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say Sam. Oh, he does have pressure. Yeah, that was gonna be my answer. I think it's Mike MacDonald. I think he made some decisions last year, he and John, that didn't pan out well. Some of them foreseeable, like hiring Ryan Grubb. Could have told you like last year that wasn't probably gonna work. I am a Coug, but it's not why I thought the Ryan Grubb thing wouldn't work. I do want to throw that out there because I had beef with Ryan for the Apple Cup, but that was not it. I just was like, this is not the guy you bring in if you're trying to get this right away. You know, he had just never coached in the NFL. It's just being an OC is a hard job. And now he's like, okay, Mike, that is, he goofed. I whiffed. Now I'm bringing in this guy. We've remade the defense in my image. I kick guys out. You know, I think that there's a lot of pressure on him to get that part right, as there is that part being the OC and the offense, as there is for, I think, every coach who is on one side of the ball. Like getting the other side right is pretty huge. I think the inverse, the inverse is true of Mike McDaniel in Miami. You know, like he had to get the defensive side right. He shuffled through, I think, 3 DCs in 3 years. D'Amico Ryan just going through something similar with his offensive side of the ball. Robert Saleh had the same issue in New York. Shanahan's been really good at it down there, but you know, like there's all these coaches are on one side of the ball. There is a lot of pressure to get the other side right. And I think there's a lot of pressure on Mike to get it right. Even if his defense is nails, you know, you don't want to be the 2022 Jets or wherever, where you got this like top 5 defense and you can't score more than 14 points or whatever. And I think that not only is that go to picking Kubiak and redoing all that, that goes to Rob's point about Sam. Like this is damn near a pretty like hand-picked offensive setup now. You got rid of Geno, you got rid of DK, you got rid of the OC that you hired and whiffed on. You got rid of the O-line coach that you also hired and whiffed on. So if you're Mike, like, yo, okay, now you got your guys. Go. Now, what if you stink again? You know, that's rough. It'd be running out of excuses there unless we all just get to yelling at John Schneider.
Yeah, so you guys are taking two of the key ones here. I'll go a different direction. Before I do, though, back to you, Mike, on this. It's interesting because you think about Pete Carroll's time. You know, his first year OC, he brought with him from USC, whiffed on it, right? And had like fired him after the first year. He went through a few different offensive line coaches, the defense coordinators, and even after the Super Bowl, had a lot of swings and misses on coordinators. Do you see this as similar to that situation, or do you see it as different?
I think it's different just because Pete at that point had been coaching for what, like 30 something years, maybe close to 40 at that point. Whereas Mike, I think it was just more the newness working against him, which is like good and bad. If I was John, if I was organization, I could understand. I could give him the benefit of the doubt. It's like, what is Mike MacDonald? 37? You know, like he's this, I guess I just turned 33. Like it's hard to have a Rolodex of people to call when your last guy hired to make some of these decisions. And you're just going to get a lot of stuff wrong if you just never done this before, whether you're Mike MacDonald's age or you're Brian Schottenheimer's age, you know, coaching for the first time. So I see it differently as like Pete kind of went a little bit too much into, oh, I know you, so let's rock. Versus Mike MacDonald's, he believes in this meritocracy, which is good in the world where people like to hire people who have the same last name as them. Mike MacDonald seems committed to just like, I want the best guys. It's like, well, how do you know who the best guys are? You don't have any facial hair. Like, it's just, you're just young and just green in this. So I think you might have facial hair now, but yeah, I see it differently, though. I think you could still end up in the same spot where you're shuffling through guys. Like, no one is above that, whether you're Bill Belichick, towards the end, he was getting the offensive side wrong as hell for a little bit, unless he was employing Josh McDaniels pretty much. So I think it's different, but it could end up being detrimental too if Mike doesn't nail this.
Yeah. Well, so I was of three different minds of guys I could name, and I'm going to tell you all three, but I'm going to tell you the one that I landed on. So John Schneider is one that comes to mind because of a lot of the reasons Mike already gave about a lot of decisions. And this is the second year of John being grand poobah of what's going on over there. So he certainly is. There's a lot of big decisions that were made. The other is Clint Kubiak, who's been a 1 year and done OC multiple times. And he's, had a breakout of the first two games last year and then did, I would say, admirably with a lot of injuries, but not so well that he's so clearly set to be a very good OC. But where I end up is a different place. And it's a player that I have not talked about as much as I think having a lot to prove. It's Jaxon-Smith and Jigba. I think that he is in a situation where there's a lot of talk about Sam Darnold. There's a lot of talk about Clint Kubiak and this offense. You could even put Ken Walker on that list of people that have a lot to prove. But that receiver room is hurting a little bit in terms of having proven reliable commodities that are still playing at a very high level. Obviously, Cooper Kupp has something to prove, and MVS. But JSN is trying to become a number one receiver that can carry a receiver room. And he was very good last year, and he even was pretty good when DK was injured and not playing. He's not going to have DK Metcalf at all this year. He's not going to have guys that necessarily pull coverage at all this year. Can JSN be transcendent enough that he proves that he can carry a wide receiver room? So I think he's got a ton to prove this year in that regard. And I'm really curious to see if he's up to the task. Next thing I wanted to cover with you guys, it relates to what Mike brought up. And I want to come to you on this, Rob. So the question is, how much pressure is there on Mike MacDonald in year two? And, in one sense, the guy won 10 games in his first year. He won, 7 road games, whatever it was. He won like 3 10 a.m. games. He did a lot of things that first year head coaches in Seattle have not done. But there's a lot of questions, and the offense is a big part of it. So how much pressure is on Mike MacDonald's shoulders right now?
Yeah, I don't think there's that much pressure on him, because I think the main thing with Mike MacDonald is always going to be how well is the defense playing. And the way the defense finished last season, they were among the top defenses in the NFL. When he took over at Baltimore, he inherited something like the 28th ranked defense. He got it to 8th in his first year with the Ravens as defensive coordinator, and then they were first the year after. I think he inherited the 28th ranked defense as well when he took over in Seattle. I don't know where they finished up, but I'd be surprised if by the end of the season, most people wouldn't recognize that they probably were performing amongst the 10 best defenses in the NFL, just like they were after year one with the Ravens. I'm not saying the Seahawks are going to have the number one ranked defense in the NFL this year, but I'd be surprised if they're not in the top 10 again. Would not be surprised if they're sort of edging towards the top 5. I think they've got the personnel for it. I think the additions they've made this offseason can help them get to that level. And I genuinely think while ever that defense is performing well, and I fully expect it to perform well, the pressure's not going to be so much on Mike MacDonald, and it will be in other areas. Now, you were talking about the offensive coordinators. This is something that the Ravens, they've kind of always lived with, a churn of offensive coordinators. I think I'm right in saying they've had 7 offensive coordinators in the last 13 years in Baltimore. Some of that's because they get hired to go and become head coaches. Some of that is because they're just not very good and they get fired, and they constantly keep churning through them. I think we might see something similar in Seattle, whether that is because Clint Kubiak ultimately goes and gets a head coaching job or just that he gets replaced. But I think while ever that defense is playing well, the pressure will probably not be so much on Mike MacDonald. The pressure will then transfer, yes, a little bit to MacDonald to work with John Schneider to find the right offensive coordinator and the right offensive pieces. but that pressure will probably be on the GM's shoulders for not getting that side of the ball right, and people will give MacDonald the pass. So as long as his defense is performing, I think he's going to be okay.
Mike, what are your thoughts there? I know you just talked about it a little bit. Curious your thoughts on what Rob said.
I think there's got a lot of pressure on Mike because pressure is determined by who can alleviate you of your job. And one thing owners care about as much as money is how you look at home. And as much what they go 10-7 last year, with like 3-6 at the crib, you can't keep doing that. You just can't. I don't really care who you are. Like Andy Reid does that, it'll get hot. There's just something about that, sitting in that suite with your other rich buddies or whatever, and your team just getting shellacked. And especially when those games are on primetime as well. We've seen for years and years and years owners overreact to that. How many coaches who are like a little teetering on the brink in the final straw, just a game on Thursday Night Football or Monday Night Football, or Sunday Night Football or whatever, or a standalone game in overseas, one of those international games, guy gets fired before they get on the plane home. Not to say that will happen to Mike MacDonald, but as good as they were, as much promise as they showed in some areas, offensively and defensively last year, you can't just be getting your butt kicked at the crib. You can't have other teams taking over your stadium. Now, that's not Mike MacDonald's fault, but I do think there is if you build it and win, they will come sort of effect to it. Like when they're kicking ass, I think you're less likely to get people like, I'm not going today. I'll sell my ticket to somebody from the Packers. Like they were chanting "Go Pack, go" in the first quarter of that game. I couldn't believe it when I was hearing that, the Green Bay game last year. So I think there's a lot of pressure in that regard to win, but also there is something to be said for winning on your primetime games, winning on your island games, standalone, wherever you are, winning at the crib. So you can't just win at the crib. You can't go 8-0 at the house and then you lose all your road games. But you guys get my point. It's the idea that like that's something that we've seen just owners care about, and not just winning, but making sure nobody embarrasses us and puts their feet on our couch, at home.
You guys are listening to the first episode of the Seahawks Collective Pod with Rob Staten, Michael Sean Dugar, and myself, Brian Nemhauser. We'll be welcoming in Annabelle Hasselback in a few weeks as well. My 2 cents on the Mike MacDonald question are this. Like, Mike MacDonald was hired because Pete Carroll had overseen an erosion of defense for basically a decade. Almost every metric had declined year over year for a decade and had gone through multiple different coordinators, multiple scheme changes, multiple personnel, multiple big trades, and nothing changed. The offense also was okay, but was also starting to at least plateau. Mike MacDonald was brought in to be an expert on one side of the ball and to then elevate the whole team. And I think that what he did in year one was prove that he is a defensive mastermind, if you want to use that term. He is a guy that belongs in the conversation for best defensive minds in the game. He upgraded every single metric you would use to measure a defense. But the thing that he has not yet proven is that he has an offensive philosophy. It took Pete Carroll getting fired multiple times, he's talked about, before he really understood how his philosophy on defense needed to translate to offense and what he wanted to see there. We're going to see if Mike MacDonald is a quicker study than that. It's not easy, as I think Mike Dugar mentioned. It's not easy to come up with that when you haven't had all those years under your belt. So I do think there is pressure for him to be able to demonstrate that he understands what he wants on the offensive side of the ball. And this was a guy that last year when we were at training camp and I would ask him about the offense, he was unhappy a lot of times when the offense had a good practice. You could see it in his demeanor. He's on a journey to be a head coach and not just a defensive coordinator. And I think that's part of what is going to be a real test in year two. All right. So next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is kind of a broad question, but you've seen the ESPN top 10 list where they have Jeremy Fowler's done this thing where they talk to coaches and front office people and they rank the top 10 at every position. There's a bunch of rankings out there. So you can pick whatever one. PFF does them. All sorts of folks do them. The question I have for you guys is, which players on the Seahawks have the biggest gap between how they are perceived nationally and how we perceive them as people closer to the team? All right. It could be that you think they're much better than what the national perspective is. It could be that you think they're much worse. Rob, start with you on this. Who comes to mind for you as having that big perception gap?
I'm probably going to pick the obvious one again. Ernest Jones, I think, is the obvious answer to this. I was a little bit surprised that he wasn't. It wasn't just that he wasn't in the top 10 linebackers on Jeremy Fowler's list. He wasn't even in the honorable mentions, and he picked about 10 honorable mentions as well. So that's quite a long list of linebackers in the end without Ernest Jones's name being mentioned. And it's not just the fact that he wasn't on that list. PFF, you would often watch the game. I'm not an X's and O's guy, so when I'm watching the game on the TV, I just get a feel for what my amateur eye can see on a TV broadcast. I've not gone and studied the all 22 to see how he performs. But after a game, you would often come away from thinking, "Wow, Ernest Jones had a good game today." And then PFF would give him a grade that suggested he might as well have just been sat in the stands watching. He was that bad. So that didn't really make any sense. And then the other thing is that you look at last year, like 2 teams traded him away. The Rams didn't want to pay him. And then they traded him to the Titans for a ham sandwich. They didn't want to pay him. They traded him away again. And then even when he got to free agency, I know he had a bit of an injury issue there, which perhaps may have put some teams off, but it didn't ever feel like he had this really competitive market. The deal the Seahawks got him back on was quite favorable. I don't really understand why. Maybe it's a positional thing, but then even Dre Greenlaw with one leg left he's getting a decent contract and getting in these rankings and stuff like that. He's barely played since that Super Bowl when he got that terrible injury. So I don't really understand why Ernest Jones doesn't get as much love. And I'm speaking to somebody who wasn't really that happy that the Seahawks gave away so much as they did compared to what the Titans gave up to acquire him for essentially 10 games. But the impact that he had for Seattle last season and the fact that they've retained him, that's one of the best acquisitions that Seattle has had in recent years. And they need him healthy next season if that defense is going to play to its best.
Mike, who's your answer?
Yeah, this is a tough one, probably because I've been paying attention. I've been on like vacation the last like 6 weeks. It's like yesterday was my first day back. But one of the things I've been looking at is like all of these lists. I love the thing Fowler does. I love Mike Sando, my colleague at the Athletics quarterback tiers. I love just kind of getting how the league feels about the Seahawks. And I generally think most of the stuff I've seen is accurate. I don't really care about PFF too much, to be honest. But outside of them, most of the stuff I've seen is pretty accurate. The Seahawks are ranked in the back half of the league in most things that I agree that they are. I think PFF liked Seattle secondary, which I can agree there. If I had to say something nice about PFF, I think in Fowler's thing, the only Seahawks that made the top 10 at their respective positions were Julian Love, Leonard Williams, and Devin Witherspoon. Jay Love and Spoon were 10, and then Leo was 6. That sounds about right. To me, maybe Spoon could be higher. I guess if you want to, have a gripe with something. I think if I had to really pick one where I'm like, I don't know, I'm higher on this if he's in the circumstances of some of the other guys. It's probably Ken Walker. Like I don't see like a talent standpoint. Like I don't see that big of a difference between like him and Bijan Robinson, for instance, like or even like Jahmyr Gibbs. I think if you were to put Ken behind the best O-line in the league, he'd be a 1,200-yard guy. He'd score a bunch of touchdowns. He already has the highlights. We've seen Ken make one-handed catches. I watched him flip over a guy on his head for a first down in Detroit. They lost the game, so it didn't matter. But that might be the most athletic shit I've ever seen. Is someone do? Ken's a freak athlete. He's got the explosiveness to take one to the house from 70 yards. He can catch. There's not much that I don't think he can do with the ball in his hands like some of these other guys who are just as highly regarded. But I think when you're playing behind the O-lines and the bad play callers and bad O-line coaches that he's been playing behind, people are probably a little bit too low on him, just knocking him for injury and not talent. That would be it. I think he might have been in the top 10 in his position in the Fowler thing last year. I'd have to go back and look. So maybe I'm reaching a little bit, but I'm a real big Ken Walker guy. And just in terms of talent, I really do think like healthy and in a better O-line situation, he's like a 1,300-yard guy to 13, like one of those Rams Todd Gurley seasons. I think that's totally possible with Ken in the right situation.
My hot take is that his flip in Detroit was every bit as impressive as Saquon Barkley's reverse hurdle last season. It was. I didn't think about it, but yeah, dude, it was insane. to see what he did on that play. So I'm with you on that, Mike. I'm going to go with a guy that I just talked to last Friday, and a Coug, as a matter of fact, Mr. Dugar, Abe Lucas. I think that I could even make the argument that there's the biggest perception gap between what Seahawks fans think of this player and what I think of this player. I think Abe Lucas can be one of the best right tackles in football. That's what I think it can happen. I think part of that also is a lot of the best right tackles in football are pretty dang old, like Lane Johnson, and some of those guys are going to be going away. But I think the only thing that stood in his way is durability, and I think he is in the right shape right now, hopefully, to be able to showcase his talent. I think this guy could be a Pro Bowl player and better, and so I think that's the guy I would go with as maybe the biggest perception gap. All right. So, kind of related to this. This is a random thing, and we're going to get into training camp here as we cross the half an hour mark. I want to know who you guys think is the best player on the Seahawks, and this can be defined as you choose it. But if you had to say, here is the player you are building around, here is the player that you would pay the most, is probably the wrong way to look at it because markets value positions differently. Who would have the highest Madden rating? Like, figure out your methodology and then tell us, who do you think is the best player on this Seahawks team? Rob, let's start with you.
Leonard Williams, I think he's the best player on the Seahawks team. I think that towards the end of last season, he was unstoppable. It's very easy to sort of think of the pick six that he had against the Jets and just that incredible show of athleticism. But it was week to week, that consistent blowing up plays in the interior. You can line him up in many different areas. He was getting into the backfield. He was making pressures. He was getting sacks. He is every bit as good as any interior defensive lineman in the league right now. Now that Aaron Donald's gone, and now that Chris Jones has maybe seen his better days, I just think Leonard Williams is right up there. And it was a pleasure to watch him at the end of last season. And I think that was sort of everybody settling down. You've got a bit more at linebacker. You know, your secondary was settled as well. He's playing well up front. I just can't wait to watch what he's going to do in year two in this defensive system. And with a lot of the pieces already in place and with other players coming in, I think he could be even better next year. What was he, something like 98th in the top 100, or he was in the 90s, wasn't he?
He was 99 even, maybe. Absolutely
ridiculous. I mean, there are not 98 players better than him in the NFL. He is a legit player. It's great the Seahawks have him. They've needed a player like that for a long, long time, and Mike MacDonald's the coach to get the best out of him. So I think he's good. If he stays healthy, he's going to have a huge 2025.
Mike?
Three things. One, my other take is that the top 100 list is a great example that the players are no better at making lists or analyzing football than we are, or the coaches or execs. Like, everyone has is bad at it because it's hard to do and it's subjective. Like, the players are no better. Their list sucks, just like they think PFF sucks, you know. The second thing, when I was researching my book, one of my like football takes coming away, because I watched like every game from 2010 to like 2015-ish, and I've concluded that Earl was the best player on the Seahawks like the entire time that he was on the team. The dude was just nuts. And I bring up Earl because that's what Spoon reminds me of. Like, having all those games fresh in my mind of seeing Earl, I think Spoon's the best player on the Seahawks. And it's just the speed and the impact that he can have on any given play with or without the ball is pretty nuts. Like, Spoon can make sure the defense scores a touchdown without touching the ball. And that's pretty crazy. And obviously he can do it with the ball in his hands too, as we've seen. He just looks like he's moving at a different rate of speed than everyone else. And it's something I haven't seen probably since Earl. I would say, like, he's just a wrecking ball. Now, a little reckless at times, like ET was too, but it's hard to impact the game like that, you know, especially on the tape. You can just see him, he covers so many different things at once. You know, there was a play in a game in Arizona. But at the time the running back in the flat checks the ball down to him, he's 15 yards away from that guy. The guy gained 1 yard. I forget who the running back was. It's just stuff like that. It's like, dude, you're like holding the turbo playing Madden with him. You know, it's ridiculous. He legitimately is one of the best players I've seen. You know, when people ask me about this job that I do, going to all the games and stuff, one of the things I tell them is that when you see some of these guys live, it changes how you feel. And there's some guys I'll just never forget seeing them the first time. D-Hop in 2017, Christian McCaffrey in 2018 and 19. Just watching some of these dudes live, it's like, oh, okay. He's different than the rest of these mortals here. And Spoon is like that for me. Watching him run around and hit people and suplex people and body slam people, it's just it's something like I've never seen before.
If you were to say, is there a third person, a third player that would be Spoon and Leonard Williams are the, I think, clear top two guys to debate. Is there a third player?
Probably. I mean, it'll probably be Jackson, I would guess. Yeah, Jackson.
I'd say might be maybe on there.
Jackson and Julian Love. I think Julian's a really good player.
I don't think there is a third player. I don't think there is a third player. And one of the questions for this team, if you go back to the best teams in Seahawks history, you go back to the 2005 Seahawks, you could debate. I mean, Walter Jones was the best player. So that probably is maybe not a good example, but there was 4 or 5 guys on there that were, you know, at least worth a debate. You go back to the LOB era team, you're talking about, there's probably a healthy debate around 5 to 7 players, maybe. And I think you could probably make the case that in that case, almost all of them were even better. If they were on this team, they would be above some of the guys that we're just talking about. Not all of them, but some of them. So I think this is a big issue for this team. Also, the fact that the 2 guys you guys named, they both play defense. Right? They're on one side of the ball, right? And so when we're talking about Clint Kubiak, we're talking about the pressure John Schneider and Mike MacDonald under to figure out the offensive side of the ball. JSN, you brought up, even Julian Love would be a third defensive player. Do they have the talent on offense to be good? And as we head into camp, they just cut Noah Fant, who was a starting tight end for them. I don't think anyone would argue he's was one of the best players on the team. Clearly, the team didn't feel that way. How much talent is there on this offense? Like, you know, Rob, I'll go to you first since Mike had the last word on this last topic. Like, are you concerned about the talent level on offense?
Not really, because I think in a year we may well feel like Dre Zabel is a really good pick and a guard that they've needed in a long time. I'm a huge Elijah Arroyo fan. I think that this time next year we could be talking about him in a way as he had a huge impact as a rookie. Obviously, he's got to stay healthy. That sort of X factor tight end that Seattle has not ever really been able to find. So 12 months, you could be talking about those 2 rookies producing the kind of talent they need on offense. If Sam Darnold can have another good year to back up what he did last year in Minnesota, then you've got 2 seasons from him. And maybe you're sort of thinking that's a quarterback who's perhaps reaching his peak and is somebody who can play well. I do think Jaxon-Smith and Jigba is a legit player, and I think he is going to end up being somebody that you can feed the football to. I know that it's not going to be the same having DK Metcalf across from him and Tyler Lockett on the same field, but I do think he's got that ability to be just a really productive, consistent, reliable player who can be a difference maker. And then, you know, you've talked about Ken Walker earlier. This offense has done a very good job of getting a lot of production out of running backs. And I can just remember when Christian McCaffrey, it's very easy to remember Christian McCaffrey as the player who ended up becoming one of the best players in the league when he went to San Francisco. When he left Carolina, there was kind of like, well, what is he really? Like, obviously he's played well, he's played in flashes, but he's had some injuries and he's never really delivered on his potential. And then he goes and plays in the Shanahan offense and he looks like one of the best players in the league and he stayed healthy. Ken Walker could do that. You know, Ken Walker has got the physical ability. Ken Walker can catch a football and make a play. Ken Walker can do a lot of different things in the backfield. I'm not saying that Ken Walker is going to be Christian McCaffrey for the next 2 or 3 years. But within this offense, I think there's the potential there to get the best out of him if he can stay on the field. So I think in a year's time, I understand why you'd raise that point now, but I'm optimistic that in a year's time, we'll probably have a few other names to add to this list and they'll be on offense.
Mike, before I throw it to you, I think one of the things that's interesting to me about this is I think we were having this conversation at this time last year and said, what was the best unit on the offensive side of the ball? I think it probably would be wide receiver with DK and JSN and Tyler, and like there's some other guys that were interesting there. I'm going to put something out there that I believe going into this camp. I think we're going to end this season saying that the most talented unit on the offense is the offensive line. And that could be a really good thing. It could be a really bad thing. But I look at that group with Charles Cross, a top 10 pick, Gray Zabel, a first round pick. You look at Abe Lucas, who I've already spoken about, who I think is very good as a third round pick. And then you've got, whether it's Christian Haynes, a third round pick, who, we'll see. But they've invested quite a bit now in that group. You can't necessarily say that about some of the other groups. Running back would be the other one for me that's in that conversation. Maybe tight end. We'll talk about that in a second. What's your take on the talent level on offense, Mike?
I'm pretty worried. I'm pretty worried because I think scheme can only do so much. It can help though. I do think scheme is very, very, very important in that regard. But yeah, I think when's the last time the Seahawks had a first team All Pro player that wasn't Bobby? I can't even. I guess Michael Dixon probably. Okay, so without Michael Dixon, I honestly don't even know the answer. It's been a while. Was anybody been second team that's not Bobby?
Russell in 2019.
Russ 2019. Yeah, okay. So that's rough. That's really rough. I think you need though, not to say accolades are everything, but I do think like you look at the last and doing all this research for the book, this point is really driven home for me. You look at John just like the Seahawks, John and Pete, not drafting Pro Bowl linemen on either side of the ball. Really, you just can't sustain winning like that. It's just hard. We're not talking about, you mentioned, is there a third guy that could be like their most talented dude? It needs to be someone else in the trenches. That's what it needs to be. Like if it was Ken, if it was Jackson, if it was Julian, that's nice, but you need trench play. You need dominant trenches. So you look at the playoffs, that's the same thing every year. And I feel like it doesn't get brought up enough. Like maybe it does, and I'm just not paying attention because it's the off season. But like, look at the Super Bowls Mahomes has lost. He got his ass kicked around in the two he's lost. He didn't play bad. And he didn't play great in this last one, but it's not just because he sucks. No, man, his dudes up front couldn't block anybody. And when you have that, you're susceptible to getting your ass handed to you, like he has. And he's probably the best ever to me. And when he doesn't have the blocking, he can get smoked. And Andy Reid's a genius offensively. Probably one of the best minds we've seen of this generation. And when he don't got no blocking, he's no better than Ryan Grubb. He's out there getting his ass handed to him, So I really, you gotta have the trenches, man. For the Seahawks, for John to not draft someone I don't think John's ever drafted a Pro Bowl edge rusher. I don't think they drafted a Pro Bowl offensive lineman. I don't believe so. That's really hard. That's where I really get concerned about the talent, because I do think you could just put a league average set of skill players, like the 17th or 16th best skill players, put the best offensive line in front of them. You're gonna win 10 games. You're gonna win 11 games. I genuinely think that. And without it, you can give me the best. You can give me a top 5 skill room, which the Seahawks have probably had before. You give me the worst offensive line, then people are gonna get fired. That's where it gives me concern.
I will say that Frank Clark did make the Pro Bowl as a drafted Seahawk, but was not with the Seahawks when he made the Pro Bowl. So for what it's worth, as one name as an edge rusher, but general point makes sense. There was some news yesterday or 2 days ago, as it now stands, that Noah Fant was let go by the Seahawks. And Rob, I'm kind of curious, when you heard that news, who came to mind for you as maybe benefiting the most from that?
Elijah Arroyo. I was a huge Elijah Arroyo fan. Thought he was worthy of a grade in the first round. And then John Schneider said after the draft that if it wasn't for the injury stuff, he would have been, I can't remember exactly the number, he said, top 20 pick or something like that, top 20 talent. It was something along those lines. That's what he showed on tape in his final year in Miami. I think he's the real deal. I think as a receiver, not as a blocker, but as a receiver, pass catcher, he does show some similarities to George Kittle, seeing what that kind of a player can do in this offense. You can line him anywhere. You can run a slant. You can run on the red line, bust a seam, yards after the catch. He's very athletic, soft hands, box out. He just looks so smooth at the Senior Bowl when he was there. I think that's a fantastic pick. They took him in the second round for a reason, and that's because I think they're going to feature him. I think they see him almost as, it could even be that he is Seattle's second most important pass catcher on the roster this year. Now, he has to stay healthy. That's obviously a concern in his career to date, but we have seen players who have some injury issues at college, and then they don't have any injury issues in the NFL. We've got to hope that Elijah Arroyo is going to be that kind of a player. I don't think he's going to be much of a blocker in year one, and AJ Barner is probably going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting there, and Sobert as well to get through that. But I think Arroyo is going to be targeted early and often in his career. I expect that he could be that X-factor playmaker that they need. I think they're probably a receiver light on this roster in terms of, I do agree to an extent with a feeling of you're only as good as your third receiver in the modern NFL. I think Elijah Arroyo could be that third receiver. And if he has the kind of impact that his talent is capable of, then I think he can work alongside Kupp and work alongside Jaxon-Smith and Jigba to maybe produce a passing game that is better than some of us expect.
Mike, we're going to take you a different direction on the same topic. So when Noah Fant was released, it also freed up even more cap space for a team that already has a bunch of cap space. There's question about who might be in line for an extension to get some of that additional cash, not necessarily the cap, but the cash that now can be spent this year that was part of that budget. Who do you think is most likely to potentially get an extension in the next month, 2 months before the season starts?
I think they should have a Charles Cross extension by the time we end this stream. Like, it's just not getting any cheaper for competence at left tackle. And if you look at the highest paid left tackles, that's what a lot of it is. It's not a bunch of all pro and Pro Bowl guys. It's just competence. It's peace of mind is really what you're paying for. I think the Darisaw contract was a really good example of that. I think he's good, but it really is just peace of mind. It's knowing if we have him, we're not screwed. You know, and that's huge in the NFL left tackle, just to be like, hey, we got him, so we're good. Like, we can worry about literally everything else on the roster. So that one should be done. That should be done before Charles steps on the field for training camp Wednesday morning. If not, then Thursday morning. If not, then Friday morning. Like, every day that goes by, you're just wasting your time, you know, just getting more expensive, you know, because there's other left tackles that are up. I believe the Chargers left tackle is up as well. So it's like, just pay your guys, and he should be the top one. He's probably the only one I'd pay. I don't know what you guys think, but of that 2022 draft class, Charles is the only one. Everyone else I'd wait on. You can kind of see how they look in the scheme or whatever if they stay healthy in Abe's case. But a Charles deal should be done, and it should be like mid 20 million per year, because that's what it takes. That's what it costs to pay for competence. And boy, do the Seahawks know what life is like without competence at left tackle. If you don't want to live in that world, go ahead and pay Charles.
All right, we're going to cover 2 more topics in the next 7 minutes, guys. All right, first one is, and this is just for you, Rob. Do you think the Seahawks are going to add anyone to a position group before the season begins? Do you think edge rusher, offensive lineman, receiver, do you think there's a position group that John Schneider is going to look to make a trade for or sign a veteran free agent that's still sitting out there?
I don't think so. I had a look to see the two positions really. I think they could probably do with an extra pass rusher, and you know, you're looking at see what receivers are left available. I just don't know how likely it is that they go and sign someone like Amari Cooper at this stage in his career. You know, when they've got young receivers, they probably want to have a look at them first. Maybe if a lot of these younger guys and Marcus Valdez-Scantling don't look much of anything in camp, maybe they go and sign someone like Amari Cooper or Keenan Allen or something like that. But I don't think they're going to rush to do that. I think they're going to give their other guys a chance to shine first. And then with the pass rushers, you know, there's a Zadarius Smith out there. There's a Carl Lawson. I don't think they're going to rush to bring Jadeveon Clowney back to Seattle. I think if there was any interest in Mike MacDonald doing that, he'd have done it by now. He's worked with him. John Schneider's worked with him. I just don't know who's out there. And then when you look at the trade market, it's quite hard. Like, sometimes I think, well, Trey Hendrickson's situation, the Bengals are like the worst team to deal with in a situation like this. It's quite hard to work out how you're going to get that deal done without massively overpaying for him. And people could say, well, just trade for him. Just give them I don't think they'd accept a second rounder for him. I think they'd probably want something ridiculous because it's the Bengals. So I don't really know what they can do right now. I'm not optimistic they're going to do anything yet, but maybe sort of later in camp when they've had a look at some of their guys, they could do. Can I just say one thing on Charles Cross though?
Please.
I do think this is important. I don't think there's any rush to pay him, just because he's got 2 years left on his contract, and I still think we're waiting to see the best of Charles Cross, and because you've got 2 years and then potentially the franchise tag as protection as well, I just give him this season to see if he can. I don't want to see Charles Cross in the top 5 for pressures and hurries again this year, or in pressures and hurries on pure pass sets. I want to see him take a step. I want to see him stop lunging off the edge. I want to see him play inside out better. I want to see him using those feet to get in position. I want to see him stronger. If he can do all those things, if it costs a bit more to just be reassured by all those things in 2025, I would happily pay him a bit more next year because you've got the cap space to do that. But I just want to see it. And I think with 2 years left on that contract and a franchise tag in your back pocket, I'm waiting until 2026 to pay Charles Cross.
Mike, we're going to end with you on this one. Tomorrow, vacation ends officially. You'll be there at training camp. Who are you looking at? Where are your eyes going to go to watch during camp tomorrow? Where do you think the most is to learn about which player, which position group? What are you going to focus on tomorrow?
Well, hopefully I can watch the whole practice. We're expecting a second kid here.
Oh man,
in the next few days. So I could, if you see me run off the field, that's probably why. But if I get to watch the whole practice in the next few practices, Sam, I gotta watch Sam. I'm not high on Sam. I've never been. I wasn't last year, even with the Vikings. The last few games proved why. So I gotta see that. I have to see it in person. I watch it every day. I gotta see the consistency. He's one of those guys who the best of him looks great. Sam's 20 best throws look as good as any other tier 1 QB's 20 best throws. They really do. I mean that sincerely. And his 20 worst throws look like Nathan Peterman's 20 worst throws. Like it's bad, but the worst of Sam is really bad. What are the Seahawks getting? I genuinely do not know. I'm kind of worried about that. I think that Sam is a step down from Geno talent-wise. And so I just got to see it. I'm watching that every day that I can because outside of the O-line, that's it. There's your season right there. What Sam Darnold are you getting? And I can tell you how your season's going to go as soon as I know the answer to that.
I think we all want to see Sam and want to know the answer to that question. I think it is absolutely, as Rob said earlier, that's the player that has the most probably to prove generally across this roster. And folks, that will do it for this first episode of the Seahawks Collective. If you haven't already, click like, subscribe, please do. We'll be here every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Rob is an absolute maniac. Annabelle will be joining us in a couple of weeks. She'll be doing it a little bit later, East Coast time as well. And then you're going to have Michael Sean Dugar and myself, Brian Nemhauser, with you along the way. So a lot more great stuff coming. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure you share it with everybody else. All right. Have a great rest of your Tuesday night. Thanks.